Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I have the pleasure of simplifying the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. In today's episode, we're diving into a fascinating concept that might just change the way that you approach your care plans in specific, and maybe even your communication in general. We're going to be talking about the paradox of choice and the single option aversion. Now, I wonder if you've ever felt overwhelmed when you're at the supermarket trying to make a decision when there's seemingly thousands of choices in front of you. I had this experience just recently prior to Easter, trying to choose Easter eggs. Light chocolate, dark chocolate, caramel filled, you name it there too. What should have been a really easy decision for me got quite overwhelmingly because there's literally hundreds of different choices. Or maybe you felt annoyed or frustrated because you've been forced into making a decision when there seems like there's only one choice. Now, it turns out our patients feel the same way when we do this to them, okay? We need to work out how to balance between too many choices and not enough. And in today's episode, I want to explore how understanding and maximizing choice for your patients can significantly enhance patient commitment and satisfaction. Now, when you get this right, when you strike the right balance by offering choices, your practice will absolutely transform. Patients will feel empowered, they'll feel valued, they're more likely to be involved in their care. This will lead to higher satisfaction and retention. These are all things that we want as well. They're more likely to commit to their care plan when they've had a role in actually shaping it, okay? Now, conversely, when we miss the mark with this by offering either too many options or just one, we risk either overwhelming our patients or alienating them as well. Now, this will lead to indecision, dissatisfaction, and ultimately a lack of trust. Now, this underscores the importance of us really finding the sweet spot when it comes to patient choice as well. Now, before we dive into what's too much and what's not enough, I want to talk to you a little bit about when we're talking about choice, what am I referring to, okay? Sort of things that we're offering choice to our patients or could be offering choice to our patients is like frequency of their adjustments, duration of their care, their scheduling options, payment options, the extent of their home care, how they want it to be communicated. Do they want to be part of your email or not? Do they want to follow you on social media as well? These are all avenues where choice not only enhances patient autonomy, but it significantly enriches the entire experience that they should be having as well. So let's dive a little deeper in. Let's uncover the magic number of choices that keeps our patients engaged and ready to move forward. So let's begin with the importance of offering choice, okay? The key takeaway here, the key thing to remember is that people don't like feeling forced, even if it's a particular service or a product that they want, okay? When we feel like we're painted into a corner, even though if we want that, and I'll share some research with you in a moment, it just doesn't feel good. Now, this research has been highlighted in many different spots, but particularly within the healthcare arena. The British Journal of General Practice shows that patients value choice because it empowers them and allows them to express autonomy and efficiency. This sentiment, I think, is especially important in healthcare, where the ability to choose, or at least to have input in the choice there as well, is vital for empowerment and control. Now, notice this. If our patients aren't empowered, they don't stay and they don't refer, okay? Now, what this looks like in some practices is some practices are tempted to have a one-size-all-fit approach, or even if you don't have this, it looks like you do. The recommendations seem incredibly rigid. There's no flexibility or room for collaboration with the patients. This type of communication is often based on the idea that we're the doctor, we're the ones making the decision, and patients should really do what we say. Now, this type of dogma sounds really great from the stage, and I, like you, have heard many chiropractic coaches or mentors stand up on the stage and talk about this, that we don't want the inmates running the asylum. On the other hand, what I see is chiropractors with such a lack of confidence that the recommendations for their frequency of care and their finances, they've set up a let's make a deal practice where pretty much all the patients are running things their way. This is the idea of, the inmates running the asylum. Now, the truth is, as with most things in life, there is a middle ground with regards to this, okay? It's not one way or the other. It's not either my way or the highway, or it's not the patients doing everything that they want. There's a really happy medium there where things can work great for both peeps. And a little bit later on, I'm going to talk about, coming up with our non-negotiables and finding our sweet spot as well. But let me share some more research, some consumer research that shows you just how impactful it can be when we offer choice as well. This particular study here was looking at the purchase of buying a new DVD player. So that gives you a bit of an idea of the age of this study there too. But there's several different research studies that kind of show the same outcome. So this study divided participants into 3 groups, each of whom were offered the opportunity to buy a new DVD player. Now, the first group could only buy a Sony DVD player. The second group could only buy a Philips DVD player. And the third group had a choice of buying either the Sony or the Philips, but they had to choose one of them, okay? Now, when presented with a single choice, very few people were keen to make a purchase decision. In fact, only 9% of people bought a Sony and 10% of the people bought a Philips DVD player, okay? So about 1 in 10 people would buy. However, when they were offered a choice of whether to buy the Sony or the Philips, then the numbers increased significantly. 32% of people decided that they wanted to buy the Sony, and 34% of people said they wanted to buy the Philips. So a whopping 64% of people actually purchased. Sorry, it was 66% of people. So offering one choice, it was 10% of people. Offering 2 choices, it went up to 66%. So this is something like a 630% increase. So the difference in the conversion rate speaks to itself. So when presented with as little as 2 alternatives, okay, it wasn't a lot of choice that they had. It's not like going into Harvey Norman, any of the big shops when there's multiple choices, okay? There were 2 choices and the purchasing rate went up 633%. So people are much more likely to buy when they have the ability to make a decision as well, okay? Now, this phenomenon is known as the single option aversion, and it refers to how consumers are unlikely to pick even an option that they want to buy if they're only given one choice as well. When you force your patients to pick only one single option, in fact, they're not really choice, that there's no force to pick anything, but if you give them only one single option to them, they're more likely to think that they're making a hasty decision. They're more likely to think that they're making an ill-deformed decision when there's no other choice. And this means they're less likely to make a choice, okay? They're more likely to be saying things like, I need some time to think about this. If you're not offering choice in your care, you're preventing your patients from starting and continuing care, and it's costing you money, okay? The research is really clear on this, consumer research, but also 25 years of experience for me and last 5 years working with hundreds of chiropractors have shown this, okay? Let's talk a little bit now about kind of finding your non-negotiables, because one of the hesitancies that chiropractors have with offering choice is, as I mentioned beforehand, they don't want to kind of open it up so the patients are all doing their own thing. They want to have a wellness practice, a family practice. They want a set of rules there, and this is understandable, okay? Now, before we dive into this, before we talk about establishing your non-negotiables, we first need to have a bit of a look at objection management, and we need to have a look at this whole concept of negotiation, because many of us have been taught this wrong. We have really wacky ideas around it, okay? We're often taught that negotiation or objection management is a fight to see who can get the largest piece of the pie, okay? Either you or the patient. It's literally a battle that we're going into, okay? Now, this negotiation or objection management isn't really that. This is really all about manipulation. Now, there are lots of fancy language patterns that we can use. There are ways that we can present people where we can try and win the negotiation of the objection. But as I mentioned beforehand, this is not what I would see as patient-centered, and this is really all about manipulation rather than objection management. Objection management isn't a fight over who can get the largest piece of the pie. When we do this really well and we understand the concept, it's about finding a bigger pie. It's about finding a way where we can both win and coming to an outcome that actually works for both of us. Now, when you start to think of objection management like this, you can start to look forward to it, okay? Your practice members will feel comfortable coming to you when they've got a challenge, as opposed to just disappearing and ghosting you and not returning when they miss their visits, because you will have created an opportunity and environment that's always about win-win. Now, this means the whole concept of this is going to mean that you're going to need to be open to testing. Now, I was confronted with these challenges. The first decade or so, 12 years that I was in practice, I learned from my teachers and my mentors that the vast majority of practice members that came into me, certainly adults, I started on 3 times a week. I was there over 4 days. It was pretty easy for them to find 3 times for them to come and see me, either before work or after work. This worked really great. We got really wonderful results with this. I saw great pre and post on their posture, on their x-rays. Every measure of their care seemed to do well. Now, for the last 5 or 6 years, as I transitioned and in the transitioning phase of this, I moved down to working 2 full days in practice. And there were some times there when I didn't have associates with me. And this meant it was impossible for me to see practice members 3 times a week. And I was in a bit of a conundrum here, okay? And I started to test this beforehand because I knew I was heading in this direction. So I started to see what would happen instead of seeing my new patients 3 times a week. What happens if I saw them twice a week? And lo and behold, there was no difference at all. I didn't see any change in their pre and post x-rays. I didn't see any change in their how quickly they got well. I saw very little change overall. Now, are there some exceptions to this? Absolutely. But by and large, there were no differences that I saw from seeing patients 3 times a week to twice a week as well. Now, I wouldn't have known this if I would have tested. And very often, what we do as chiropractors is we have these strong lines in the sand that we won't and we're not prepared to cross, but we've never really tested it. And so often when practice members are coming to me and they're wanting flexibility and around things, I'm totally open for running tests with them. So I understand your schedule, and I'll get into some of the language of it in a moment there too. But, let's run a test. Let's test this and see. And if it works, then high five, great. And if it doesn't, we need to look at other angles there as well. Establishing your non-negotiables is a really personal thing. And I've been looking for years to find a set of rules for it. But it's different for all of us based on many different things. There's a line that each of us won't want to cross. And often that line, though, is quite grey and it changes depending on the circumstances. I know that it did for me as well. So I'd encourage you to start to run some tests, and I'd encourage you to start to look at what parts of your care are flexible and which are not. And this is totally up to you. If you've decided I'm never going to change my frequency or the duration of my care, then high five to you. But just understand that if you're not offering any flexibility and choice inside of that, it is costing you. The research would suggest that's the thing. Now, as a part of doing this, one of the things I would regularly say to my practice members is, look, there's absolutely flexibility to your approach, but there are also some core elements to your care plan that are crucial for your recovery. There's some things that we don't want to mess around with, okay? And I might say the key to you getting results here is consistency with your adjustments, okay? We need this to correct the stress that's built up on your spine there too. This is a non-negotiable, okay? We can't come in 2 times one week, one the week after, then a fortnight after that too. That type of higgledy-piggledy approach there will not give you the results. There would be a line in the sand there for me as well, okay? Now, in order to do this, when you're finding out your non-negotiables, you really want to engage in collaborative decision-making. This is just a good thing across the board. The days of it being my way or the highway, I think that was 1950s or 1940s healthcare, okay? The white coat was God, and there's only one way to do it. But our community, our practice members, we're all about choice nowadays, the right amount of choice there. So, offering alternatives, encourage practice member input as well. Highlight the importance of goals. When people are wanting to change things over, we need to remind them of what's at stake here. What is the goal there too? And the key thing when we're doing this, and what chiropractors often forget to, is they forget to clarify consequences. So if we're offering choices, we also have to offer the consequences. We have to make sure that we're transparently communicating the potential outcomes or the limitations. So I might saying something like this, choosing a less frequent adjustment schedule might extend the overall care plan. Now, it's going to take a little longer for you to see results, and it might actually even take a few more adjustments in the long term. But if it's more manageable for you, we can absolutely make that work. Is that okay with you? Now, in many situations, the practice member will say, yeah, that's fine with me. And it's, high five, brother, let's get on to it. But there are certain circumstances when I put this forwards and I articulate the consequences, the practice member is going to say, well, no, not really. In which case I'm going to say, well, what would you like to do about that? And often they'll come back and say, well, look, maybe I will start with 3 times a week or twice a week, or maybe I will commit to the next 6 weeks. But ultimately, this is collaboration that we're doing there too. But understand you will need to find out where your non-negotiables are. Otherwise, it'll be a free-for-all in your practice. If each and every practice member is just running things their way, administratively, it's a nightmare for your staff to manage. It can be unenjoyable for you to manage as a practitioner. And it's flat out not what's best for our practice members, okay? But remember, let's not look at either end where, it's my way or the highway, or it's everybody doing a free-for-all. Let's find that balance in the middle there where there's collaboration, where there's good objection management, where you're trying to find something that is a win-win for everybody as well. Now, we can absolutely get too much choice, and I kind of touched on this a little bit before when I was talking about wanting to buy my Easter eggs as well, okay? Now, the definitive study that talks about this, and you might have heard this before as well, came from Iyengar and Lepper. These were 2 research scientists out of Stanford and the Columbia University, and was done back in the year 2000. Now, in this particular research study, they set up a table and they were selling jam outside a fancy supermarket as well, okay? The research assistants dressed as store employees, and they offered samples of flavors of the jams, and they offered a choice between either 6 samples or 24 samples. And they rotated the selection each hour. So hour 1, there was 6 samples. Hour 2, there was 24. Now, ultimately, what the researchers were able to do is they examined the behavior of 500 shoppers. There was 240 during the 24 flavors and 260 during the 6 flavors. Now, initially what happened is the more choices that were offered when there was 24 there as well, more people stopped. So 60% of the shoppers who encountered the 24 flavors actually stopped to sample them, okay, compared to only 40% of the shoppers who encountered the 6 flavors. All right, so let me clarify on that. When there was more flavors out there, more people stopped, okay? But the research didn't stop there. It also looked at the buying habits because ultimately what they wanted to see is how many people would actually buy the jams. So of the 60% of shoppers who stopped when there was 24 flavors, only 3% made an actual purchase. However, of the 30% of shoppers who stopped for the 6 flavors from there too, the purchases were at 40%. Okay, so when you break the numbers down there, 6 times more people purchased when there was 6 flavors compared to 24 flavors. They talked about decision fatigue there as well. The additional flavors were great for stopping people, but they led to really terrible conversions. Now, I see chiropractors making this mistake all the time. And the area I see this making mistake is the way they present their fees when it comes to the report of findings. So I recently had a chiropractor who I was working with, a community influencer member, going through his report of findings, and he sent me his paperwork. And I read through his paperwork 3 or 4 times and was no closer to understanding his fee options because there were that many different choices and it was really unclear. Now, if I can't wrap my mind around what his fee options were, what chance does his patient have as well? Now, again, what we do is we just decrease it. I was working with another chiropractor recently who had 5 different payment options and we broke it down just into 2. I said, just offer these 2 options from there. And in doing that, the number of patients that were prepaying significantly went up, okay? When we offer a lot of choice, people end up overwhelmed and they end up with a decision fatigue as well. So how much choice is enough as well? Okay. Now the research tells us is at the bottom end, it should definitely be more than 1. Okay. When there was only 1 choice of 1 DVD player, it didn't work great. But when we offered 2, it really improved. But at the top end, it's not clear how much, we saw before that, when there were 6 jams, okay, there was more purchasing when there was 25, but if they have it offered 3 or 4 or 5, would that been better? We're not really sure there as well. My experience is that offering 2 or 3 choices is what works best for most of the decisions that we're offering towards our patients as well, okay? Now, for instance, there's some research to suggest that 3 pricing options is good practice. It helps to guide our patients towards making a choice that feels suited to their needs and their budget. This method often also deploys a decor price. So it's an option that's not necessarily expected to have people purchase it as well, but it makes the other 2 options way more attractive. So this might be a one-time payment option. So, most chiropractors, what they're going to do is you can pay per visit. It's this. You can pay all of it all at once. It's this. Or we've got an installment option there too, okay? Now that installment option often looks really attractive next to the, big one-time payment or the expense of paying per visit as well. So we want to find a balance between it there too. But in essence, what we want to be making sure that we're doing is we're offering more than a choice of just 1. And my suggestion would be that we're offering somewhere between 2 and 3 options as well. So let's bring all this together. As we draw this to a close and we reflect on kind of the journey that we've gone through so far, we've unpacked the importance of offering the right amount of choice, enough to empower but not overwhelm. What I want to encourage you to do is look back through the decisions that you're offering from your patients, through to their frequency of care, the way they pay for the care when they come in for their appointments, how you communicate with them. And look, am I offering choice at all, or is there only one choice? And if I'm doing this, am I painting them into a corner? Am I making them feel forced to make a decision? And if you're doing this, okay, and even if you're doing this in a really kind, heart-centered sort of way there too, if we're not having choice there as well, we're unlikely to be able to empower our patients in the way they ought to. Now, on the flip side of this, is there way too much choice? Is there multiple ways that people can pay that it's confusing and overwhelming? And this is leading to decision fatigue and stopping them from, starting and or continuing with you. Once you've identified these things, I want you to simplify. Move those choices from 1 to 2. And when there's more than 4 or 5, bring that back to 2 or 3 as well, okay? Folks, that's it for this episode. As always, thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives. I'll see you back here next week. See you soon. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my community influencer program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.